The bell above the door gave a soft, tired jingle when he stepped inside, almost apologetic, as if even it didn't expect anyone important to arrive this late in the evening. Warm air heavy with garlic, butter, and roasted meat wrapped around him, familiar and faintly nostalgic. Daniel Harper paused just long enough to let his eyes adjust, then slipped his hands into the pockets of his worn jacket and walked in like a man with nowhere else to be. The hostess glanced up, her smile already half-formed for the couple behind him, then flickered when she saw his clothes. The smile didn't vanish completely, it thinned, became efficient. "One?" she asked. "Yes," Daniel replied pleasantly. She grabbed a menu and led him past the windows, past the booths where laughter rose and fell in easy waves, toward the back of the dining room. With every step, the lighting dimmed slightly, the music dulled, the energy softened. Table 12 waited near a tall plastic fern whose leaves were permanently dusty no matter how often they were wiped. A cracked window beside it hummed quietly with the evening traffic outside. "Here you go," the hostess said, already turning away. Daniel thanked her and sat down, placing his cap on the table beside the menu. The chair wobbled slightly, he adjusted it with a practiced nudge. He didn't mind the location. In fact, he preferred it. From here he could see almost everything: the bar, the server station, the flow of staff between kitchen and tables. He folded his hands and waited. At first, it felt almost peaceful. The restaurant pulsed with life. A server laughed too loudly near the bar. Wine glasses chimed. A birthday candle flared somewhere, followed by applause. Daniel watched it all with calm, observant eyes, the way he had learned to do long ago, back when he was a busboy himself, memorizing the rhythm of service so he could anticipate what needed doing next. 5 minutes passed. No one came. That wasn't unusual. He knew how nights went. He glanced around and noticed that a waitress with a blonde ponytail, Emily, according to her name tag, was working the section closest to him. She moved quickly, confidently, greeting guests by leaning slightly toward them, smiling with practiced warmth. Daniel's table remained untouched, like an island no one wanted to dock at. 10 minutes. A couple was seated at the table beside him. Within moments, Emily appeared with 2 water glasses, ice clinking cheerfully. "I'll be right back for your drink order," she said brightly. Daniel watched her step around his table as if it were an inconvenient obstacle. He cleared his throat softly when she passed. She didn't look up. At 15 minutes, hunger began to stir, but it was muted, secondary to a growing sense of curiosity. Daniel pulled a small notebook from his pocket, flipping it open beneath the table where it wouldn't attract attention. He wrote the time and a brief note. Old habit. Observation before reaction. A man in a tailored jacket took a seat across the room. He was greeted immediately. The manager stopped by to shake his hand. Complimentary bread arrived. Daniel inhaled the scent as the basket passed him by, his stomach tightening slightly. 20 minutes. Emily returned to the neighboring table, laughing again. She glanced toward Daniel's section, her eyes skimming over him without landing. It wasn't overt rudeness. It was something quieter, more unsettling, dismissal. Daniel shifted in his chair, leaning back slightly so he was more visible. He rested his forearms on the table. Still nothing. By 25 minutes, the family who had been seated after him already had drinks and appetizers. The youngest child was coloring placemats with a crayon, her tongue sticking out in concentration. Daniel watched the scene within. Odd heaviness settling in his chest. He'd seen this before. Not here, at least not that he knew of, but often enough elsewhere to recognize the shape of it. 30 minutes. A bead of irritation threatened to surface, but he pushed it down. This was the point. If he reacted now, he would be no different from any frustrated guest. He wasn't here to complain. He was here to witness. A busboy paused near his table to adjust the fern. "You doing okay, sir?" the boy asked, eyes darting toward the kitchen. "I'm fine," Daniel said. "No one's taken my order yet." The boy blinked. "Really?" He frowned. "I'll let someone know." Daniel thanked him. The boy hurried off, sneakers squeaking faintly against the tile. For a moment, Daniel thought that would change things. He straightened, attentive. Nothing happened. 35 minutes. Emily passed again, carrying a tray of drinks. This time Daniel caught her eye, just barely, and lifted his hand an inch off the table. She hesitated, her expression tightening almost imperceptibly, then continued walking. Something hardened quietly inside him. He remembered his first restaurant, the one he'd opened with borrowed money and stubborn optimism. He remembered promising himself that no guest would ever feel small under his roof. That promise echoed now, uncomfortably loud. 40 minutes. Daniel glanced around. Other diners were beginning to notice. A woman near the window frowned in his direction, then whispered something to her companion. The man shrugged, unconcerned. Emily stopped at a nearby table, pen poised. Daniel spoke before he could second-guess himself. "Excuse me." She turned, her smile already strained. "Yes, I've been waiting a while," he said calmly. She sighed, not dramatically, just enough to convey annoyance. "I'll be with you in a minute, okay? We're really busy." Her eyes flicked past him, already moving on. Daniel nodded. Of course. She didn't return. The minutes stretched into 5. Then 10. At 45 minutes, the chair across from Daniel remained empty. His glass remained non-existent, his menu untouched. He closed his notebook slowly. Around him, the restaurant carried on, blissfully unaware of the quiet reckoning forming at table 12. The jazz music swelled slightly, a trumpet bending a note that hung in the air like a question. Daniel Harper sat still, patient as stone, knowing that this moment, this long, deliberate neglect, was about to matter far more than anyone in the room could imagine. The moment Daniel pushed his chair back, the faint scrape of wood against tile sounded far louder than it should have. A few heads turned out of reflex, then turned back, until he stood fully upright. There was something in the way he straightened his shoulders, in the calm precision of the movement, that drew attention without demanding it. He removed his cap and placed it neatly on the table. His hair, silver at the temples, caught the warm overhead light. The worn jacket no longer looked tired on him, it looked intentional. He took one step forward, then another, moving toward the center aisle that split the dining room in two. "Excuse me," he said. The word was not loud. It wasn't sharp, but it carried. Conversation stuttered, laughter thinned, a server at the bar paused mid-pour, amber liquid trembling at the rim of a glass. Emily, halfway to the kitchen, stopped as if someone had tugged an invisible string tied to her spine. Daniel stood where everyone could see him now, hands relaxed at his sides. "I've been sitting at table 12, he continued, voice even, measured, for 45 minutes. Silence spread outward, table by table, like a slow spill. In that time, I wasn't greeted. I wasn't offered water. I wasn't told there would be a wait. He looked around, meeting eyes. Without accusation, I was simply ignored. A chair shifted. Someone cleared their throat. Near the window, a woman's brows knit together as she looked from Daniel to the servers clustered near the bar. Emily turned fully now. Color drained from her face as recognition sparked, not of his name, but of the situation. Her mouth opened slightly, then closed. A manager hurried out from behind the bar, smile already plastered on, voice eager and thin. "Sir, I'm so sorry. There must have been a misunderstanding." Daniel raised a hand. The manager stopped short. "My name is Daniel Harper." The effect was immediate. The manager's smile collapsed. His eyes widened just enough to be noticeable. A murmur rippled through the room as a few diners recognized the name, phones discreetly pulled from pockets to confirm what they'd just heard. "I'm the owner of this restaurant," Daniel said. The room froze. A fork slipped from someone's fingers and clattered against a plate. A child stopped swinging her legs under a booth. Even the music seemed quieter, as if the speakers themselves were listening. The manager swallowed hard. "Mr. Harper, I came in tonight without announcing myself," Daniel went on, still calm, still steady. "Because I wanted to see what happens when no one thinks I'm watching." He turned slightly, taking in the dining room, the well-dressed couples, the families, the solitary diners like himself. "What I saw," he said, "wasn't a mistake. It was a pattern." Emily's hands began to tremble. She clasped them together at her waist, eyes fixed on the floor. "Some tables were greeted within seconds," Daniel continued. "Others waited longer. And one table," he glanced back toward table 12, "wasn't acknowledged at all." The woman near the window exhaled sharply, as if something she'd carried quietly had finally been named. A man at the bar shifted uncomfortably, suddenly very interested in his drink. Daniel faced the staff now, his gaze firm but not cruel. This restaurant was built on the idea that every guest matters. Not the loudest, not the best dressed, every guest. He turned back toward Emily. "Can you tell me why my table was overlooked?" Emily's throat worked. I thought someone else had it," she said weakly. Daniel tilted his head slightly. "You passed my table 6 times. Her eyes filled. "I didn't think," her voice broke. "I didn't think you were waiting for 45 minutes, Daniel said quietly. The words landed heavier than any shout could have. The manager stepped forward again, sweat visible at his temples. This doesn't reflect our standards. We'll comp your meal, of course, and... Daniel shook his head. This isn't about a free meal. He addressed the room once more. How many of you have ever felt invisible in a place like this? For a moment, no one moved. Then, slowly, a hand lifted. Then another. A woman nodded. A man near the back looked down, jaw tight. Emily covered her mouth, a sob escaping despite her effort to contain it. Daniel's voice softened, but it did not lose its edge. That shouldn't happen here. Not ever. He looked at the manager. Effective immediately, there will be mandatory retraining for all staff, front and back of house. Not just on service steps, but on awareness. The manager nodded rapidly. Yes, absolutely. And management, Daniel added, will conduct regular undercover visits. Not announced. Not scheduled. A ripple of nervous understanding passed through the servers. Daniel turned back to Emily. She was crying now, silent tears streaking down her cheeks. You're not fired, he said. A collective breath was released. But, he continued, you will shadow every section for the next 2 weeks. Starting with tables you usually overlook. Emily nodded frantically. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I really am. Daniel met her eyes. I believe you. Just make sure the next apology is shown, not spoken. He let the silence sit for a moment longer, then turned and walked back to table 12. The path seemed to open for him now, staff parting instinctively. He sat. Within seconds, a glass of water appeared, hands shaking slightly as it was set down. Bread followed. The manager hovered, uncertain. Daniel picked up the water, took a slow sip, and finally allowed himself a small exhale. Around him, the restaurant had changed. Servers moved with heightened awareness. Eyes lingered on tables that might once have been skipped. Voices softened. The room felt humbled, attentive, awake. Daniel opened his notebook one last time and wrote a single line. Not for the restaurant, for himself. Then he closed it, set it aside, and looked around, not as an owner, not as an undercover test, but as a man quietly making sure that no one else in the room would be forgotten again.